Generally speaking, a lot of visual effects works against you for a lot of reasons. It can be numbing. You can kind of debase the value of a given effect by having too many of them. They can blow your budget. It's better to have a few memorable set pieces. From a writing standpoint, I sort of treat it as a standalone thing. I'll figure out where it's going to start, what the kickoff is, what the kind of opening bell of the set piece is, and where the resolution is. I'll figure out where my out point is, and then I'll work within that so that it's not too long, it stays focused, and it stays of a piece. And I mean, I think just like there's an art to scene writing, I think there's an art to creating a set piece. It's kind of a film within a film, and it kind of has its own rules, and it's got a beginning, a middle, and an end, some kind of resolution. That end may coincide with an act break, or it may not. But a suspense sequence or a scene, a dramatic scene in a film might be a 4 or 5 page dialogue scene that's done in some stylized way, maybe without any cuts, maybe some circulating Steadicam shot that moves sinuously through some dramatic moment. That would be a set piece. So then you have to pick your battles carefully. What's the narrative purpose of the set piece? So to use the example from Terminator of the first future flashback, it was actually just to build character for Michael Biehn's character. It was to show his traumatic world and why he was basically a walking, physically scarred and mentally scarred example of post-traumatic stress syndrome. He was the living embodiment in the present day of how bad that future was and why you needed to prevent it from occurring, right? So it had a powerful narrative and character purpose in that film, but it was also just stuff I wanted to see. And that's another thing, is there are a lot of kind of rules and advisories about why you put things in movies, and they all have to serve a purpose, except they don't. Sometimes it should just be something you want to see as a filmmaker. And sometimes the only way to see it is to make it and show it. And I remember having this discussion with one of the heads of 20th Century Fox when Avatar was almost done. And they were complaining about the flying scenes. Why does this flying scene go on so long? You've already proved the point. It doesn't advance the narrative. It doesn't advance the character. I said, you're right on every count. You've ticked every box like a good studio executive. But guess what? I want to see it. And I extrapolate from that, and Stanley Kubrick was a firm proponent of this principle. If I want to see it, my cognitive leap is there are going to be lots of people that want to see it and want to see it for itself, not for its purpose. Right? Because there is a purpose to the things you want to see. The purpose is to be present, to be in that world, to be enjoying what's happening, to sustain a feeling. So those flying scenes actually did have a big purpose. That's when Jake and Neytiri fell in love. And I got into a big fight with the studio over that. And I'd like to say, fortunately, I prevailed because I love those flying scenes. They're great. But life is a whole lot easier if you can actually dig deep and examine why you've made a decision or why you have that instinct. Because it's going to cost somebody else a bunch of money to follow up on that instinct. And so the more you can share it, the more you can inspire others with it and why that choice makes sense, the better life is going to be. Set pieces often are good candidates for previs. Chances are you're not going to have a budget to previs the entire picture, nor do you need to. You should only have to previs the things that are extraordinary and require really tight interdepartmental planning well before the fact. So in terms of the previs process, you can't just start storyboarding until you know what things are going to look like, because what are you going to draw? Is the character wearing a trench coat or a loincloth? So you have to do some design before you can even start storyboarding. Otherwise, you're just going to do stick figures, which isn't going to tell anybody anything, yourself included. So I say start the design process, start to evolve the storyboards. Now, some people work with storyboards and some people work more with previs tools. You can use a suite of keyframe previs. You can do little animation pieces, sort of blank-faced, but at least it gives you the dynamics and the framing. And you start to think about composition, and you start to think about cutting. And now you'll essentially do some kind of a pre-cut of the scene with your previs. It doesn't mean you're bound to shoot it that way. You're always going to be open to inspiration of the moment. But it's a good jumping off place so people know, like, how much do I have to build? What does the director expect here in terms of the action? How long am I going to be on something? How much detail do we need? What kind of action are we going to try to do? How are we going to move the camera? How are we going to support the camera? Is it on a crane? Is it on a Steadicam? Is it being handheld? You know, it starts to trigger 1,000 questions. And a good team around you will start to hit you with those questions. You know, the DP is going to want to know, are we on a wide lens style or are we on a longer lens style? Are we on a backlight style? Are we on a diffused light style? What's the style? You know, because there's 1,000 different ways to light a scene. There's 1,000 different ways to shoot a scene. Presumably the filmmaker, if they don't come in with a style initially, they're going to have to find one that suits the piece, that suits the story. That's a critical part of it. And when those questions start to get answered, then you can start saying, okay, I need this shot, and this shot. Just from my own experience, a good example of a set piece that was done on a film that was made on a very low budget is Reese's flashback of the future, of the traumatic future that he comes from in the first act of The Terminator. And I say the first act because Reese hasn't met Sarah yet, and he hasn't met the Terminator yet. So this is all sort of in the character setup, and I wanted to see this future soldier in his world. I wanted to go into it through his fatigue-induced dream state and come out of it where he's shocked and disoriented and back in our present, which is his past. I knew it was going to involve visual effects, models, you know, miniatures, miniature explosions, and some full-size live-action elements that were done in a set of some ruins, some post-nuclear Holocaust ruins. So I thought, all right, I better draw this up. So I approached it in a very disciplined fashion. I got my roommate to put on some kind of military uniform. I went and bought some guns. We went out in a field someplace, and I took pictures of him in all the different poses that I wanted. And I also did that for the car chases as well, which I also storyboarded. Had him, you know, hang out the window. I wanted to be able to see what kind of positions you could get into with the weapons, what kind of lenses I wanted to be on. Did I want it to be on telephoto lenses or close lenses? Wanted to make the guns look big, so shorter lenses, and start to think, well, how am I going to shoot this? How can I get the insert car there? So I started going through the whole exercise. I got my long-suffering roommate to basically play every character in the film except for Sarah. I think he played Sarah a couple times. And then I brought it all back. I printed up all the photos. This was back in the days of photochemistry, so I had a bunch of prints all over my desk, and I just started drawing it all up.